I would like to announce the first Africa Communication Summit 2023 opened. Thank you very, very much one more time for all of you. And I would like to give the floor to our executive committee member of WCFA and our African premium super African delegate, Thabisile Fumo.
Maxime, and thank you for making that cool video. I'm jealous now, and I'm like, we all should be able to get into that space.
You need a PR. You need a PR.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining. And this is our inaugural conversation, and we've been having a lot of conversations within the African continent. And we thought, as the World Communication Forum, there is an opportunity, and this has happened today, that we've got the North, we've got the South, and the West, and the East of Africa all together in one room to begin a very critical conversation around sustainability. And today we'll be questioning as to whether, as PR and comms practitioners, are we playing a role in that space? Could we play a role in that space? And I look forward to the beautiful insights that we are going to get from our keynote speakers and our panelists, who I'm very grateful for having taken the opportunity to join us today. But we cannot talk about sustainability without bringing the sustainability experts on board to actually tell us what sustainability is about, and what they see from the outside is the role that we should play as PR and communication practitioners. And on that note, it is my pleasure to call upon a friend and a colleague, Paul Kepeuls, who's a director for Synergy Global, who's going to give us just a few words about what he sees is the role that we can play as practitioners. Welcome, Paul, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thabisile. Can you hear me, Thabisile?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. And I hope everyone can. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And I wish I could wrap away at my speech, which I've been asked to do. And a very warm welcome to this African Communication Summit. And thanks so much, Thabisile, for the invitation to welcome everyone. And our journey together over the years has come through many, many complex situations and has been very rewarding. I guess what a time it is to be having a summit about African communications and public relations. I remember very well in my career, I've been in my work for about 30 years now, and I remember very well Newsweek, Economist, Time magazine front covers over the last few days, how they've gone from the lost and hopeless continent narrative to the continent of hope and opportunity. So much hope for the continent, especially given that it provides massive global opportunities of minerals and metals, especially those for the energy transition, the opportunity of agriculture, the opportunity of the youth and the capacity to work, the opportunity of the market for selling goods into Africa, the opportunity of growing cities and developing infrastructure, which needs to be bigger and better and smarter, and the opportunity for innovation in financial services, as well as education, skills, and health improvements. However, we're also very young in terms of governing countries in a colonial environment, and the advent of democracies highlights our youth. We have seen various coups d'etats happening in the last few years in many countries. We've seen massive corruption, and we've seen a huge migration crisis from climate change and conflict. We are certainly a continent of contrasts. Seems like so much of the continent's inability to prosper is because we are suffering from some lethargy, and we kind of stuck. I think of this as a permanent state of lockdown in a way. We have to shake ourselves out of a slumber, make the opportunities happen for ourselves, and take ownership of both the good and the bad. What we know about being African is that we have to dig deep into our capacity for bravery. And I hope that during the course of your deliberations in this summit, you will be brave enough to confront the challenges that lie ahead. And I encourage you to create a space for bravery. Let me say why I think bravery is actually paramount. The loss of trust at a global level over the past few years is creating a lot of conflict at all levels of society. There seems to be a relentless pressure to pull society apart from each other. Social media algorithms that create polarization, debate and division, outrage. There's been a tectonic shift, which we now, this means that we need to really take on board and confront the that lie ahead. We've become cynically deaf to communications, with a corresponding lack of trust in government, in business and civil society leadership. We need to find better ways of how communication can cut through this and work against the forces that are pulling us apart. The challenges we face as a continent requires great cooperation and collaboration. So can we recode the algorithms that bring us together, not tear us apart? We are no longer operating in a world where simply communicating a positive message about sustainability will create a positive change in the audience. The significant rise of skepticism, of power and authority creates the challenge for communication professionals like yourselves. Much of my work in the mining, energy, and agriculture sector is often in managing risks and crises. And what I've learned is that being sufficiently brave to be honest, to have difficult conversations over time, and to be able to measure the impact of the work that we do, even if the result is not as good as we wanted, creates a momentum for positive change. The backlash against sustainability and ESG initiatives recently is making this conversation even harder, given the high levels of skepticism. Africa has a story to tell and needs to define its own narrative and not to be cowtailing to the needs of the West nor the East. We have always said we cannot be defined as the poverty and conflict continent. And we have challenged this rhetoric and seen it as fundamentally wrong. Communicating an alternative future is what is needed, but it has to be backed up by credible data and science and the voices of the continent's people. And I'm appealing to you as communications professionals to take this on board. For example, we are at the risk of undermining our potential by saying that we should be let off the decarbonization effort that the world is undertaking. Because as a continent, we need to go through our own phases of development, as the world has done, which is based on burning fossil fuels. But this narrative compromises our growth and our future. It'll hold us back for generations to come. We know that Africa suffers disproportionately from climate change. And so this must drive our ambition to not create even bigger problems for the continent. We need a narrative that not carbonizing will in fact allow the continent to leapfrog in development. Through mining and metals, through agriculture, cities, through technology, through our natural resources such as oceans and forests. Most importantly, speaking with the youth and listening deeply to the youth is critical in this regard. I believe this is where our success will lie. And the role of the communications sector is critical in this regard. So on this note, I want to you to the African Communications Summit, the inaugural one, and wish you all the very best in your deliberations. Thanks, Thabisile, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul, for those words. And I think this is a good scene setter. So Paul, we are not going to ask the communicators to ask you questions, but we are really going to ask them to mull over it so that as we go through our own deliberations, we are able to reference from some of the things that you have told us today. We do hope as the World Communication Forum, and most importantly, as African communicators, we can be able to call upon you that you so aptly suggested today. So thank you so much for your participation. I would like to then hand over to our first keynote speaker. He doesn't need a lot of introduction. I call him YBO, but his name is Yomi. He is the president of the African Public Relations Association, a group managing director of CMC, and he is what we call Africa's best PR expert. And on that note, I would like to hand over to a friend and a colleague, Yomi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ntabisile. Nice to hear from you again. Very quickly, let me make my intro, thank Max, my dear brother and my friend. APRA would not be where it is today without the support of people like Max. He's accompanied us to so many countries, even in the early stages, and we're still here. And I do hope that he will, he's promised to be in South Africa, I beg your pardon, in Cote d'Ivoire, which is coming up next year, May 13th to 17th. Cote d'Ivoire, the capital city is Abidjan, and I use this opportunity to invite everybody to the APRA Conference 2024. Thank you very much. I do recognize everybody, Paul, who's just giving us a welcome address, and of course, my predecessor in office, Mr. Peter Moutier from Africa. I thank everyone who's been able to join from all over Africa. And I'm going to go straight into my presentation, except for the fact that all of a sudden I can't find it, but I'm going to look for it somewhere here. Where the subject, let me just bring that up. I'm sorry, I had put it up and I don't know where it went into all of a sudden. So please give me 1 second to just bring it up, and then we go along the way. Just a second, I put it up here. All right, I'm going to have to read from my phone. This is my presentation. Okay, there we are. This shouldn't be happening, but it is actually happening. I need a bigger screen. This afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be speaking on the subject of communication as a game changer in the sustainability agenda of Africa. Great topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, and the organizers of the Africa Communication Summit of WCFRFA, I thank you for inviting me as a keynote speaker. Now, in the vast landscape of Africa, communication stands as a very powerful force, driving transformative change, and steering the course towards a sustainable future. As the continent embraces the challenges of environmental conservation, social equity, and economic resilience, effective communication has emerged as a game changer, shaping narrative, fostering collaboration, and inspiring collective action. Now, historically, communication has always played a crucial role in the development agenda of the African continent. For example, during the pre-colonial period, in the absence of written records, oral tradition played a vital role. Griots, storytellers, and community elders communicated history, values, and societal norms through storytelling, music, folklore, and other oral forms. Also in the colonial era, the introduction of print media became a significant factor in communication and of course broadcast later on. However, the communication landscape was largely controlled by the colonial powers, shaping narratives to serve imperial interests. The post-colonial era was no different. Communication played a pivotal role in mobilizing independence movements across the continent. Leaders used speeches, newspapers, radio broadcasts to unify people against colonial rule. Today, advancement in technology has improved significantly connectivity. However, the access still remains uneven in Africa, with the urban areas benefiting much more than the rural areas. The digital revolution has indeed transformed communication in Africa. The rise of the internet, mobile phones, and social media has allowed for faster and more widespread dissemination of information. One of the biggest broadcasts as what we have is an organization known as MultiChoice and DSTV. And they've established across Africa, they have news channels, they have entertainment channels, they have sports channels, and so on and so forth. And across Africa, when you travel, DSTV or MultiChoice, as they're either called, have become a phenomenon. We also have other stations across Africa, SABC, and quite a number of stations who are now broadcasting both on the continental and the international stage. Even in the area of developmental campaign, communication has been central to health and education programs, addressing issues such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, Ebola, and of course, recently COVID, by promoting literacy. We also have issues with things like polio, smallpox, and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, communication continues to play a critical role in raising awareness and mobilizing action towards achieving the 17 SDG goals, offering new opportunities and challenges in the pursuit of sustainable and inclusive growth. Now, is communication playing a role in sustainability agenda in Africa? That's the big question we are here to answer. My answer is a definite yes. Communication, in fact, effective communication must and is vital for raising awareness, fostering understanding, mobilizing action, and promoting accountability in the pursuit of sustainable development in Africa. I'm going to give a few insights into how communication is contributing to this sustainability agenda. I would also mention along the way some challenges that it faces. One, awareness and education. Communication is raising the awareness about sustainability issues by educating the public on issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and the importance of several sustainable practices, including wildlife conservation. In Africa, or at least Nigeria, where I come from, we have a terminology for animals that are found in the forest. They are called bushmeat, bush and then meat, which is understandable. So you find out that a lot of animals are becoming extinct because of practices. And we've got campaigns going on using footballers, using celebrities to let people know that by killing this species of animals, you are reducing they're becoming extinct. And so that's going on a lot. Now, the challenge here lies in reaching diverse audiences and ensuring that the communication strategies work effectively. Number two, stakeholders engagement. Effective communication engages diverse stakeholders, including governments, business, NGOs, and communities, fostering collaborations and responsibility for sustainability. Number three, policy advocacy. Communication strategies have played a key role in advocating sustainable policies, influencing decision makers to prioritize environmental conservation and social responsibility. Number four, corporate social reporting, sustainability reporting. Many businesses are adopting transparent communication practices in Africa, reporting on their sustainability efforts. There's something that they call the triple bottom line, where you're talking about the profit, you're talking about the planet, and you're talking about the people. Number five is digital media and activism. Digital platforms and social media have empowered environmental activists and grassroots movements to amplify their voices, mobilize support, and hold entities accountable for unsustainable practices. Of course, number 6 is community development, with initiatives are empowering local communities to participate in sustainable practices as community-based conservation efforts. Only yesterday, I was in Nigeria, the chief of customs, and a traditional ruler who lives at the border town came to visit him at his residence. And he was telling me that this traditional ruler is one of the foremost, is in the combat against smuggling. Meanwhile, normally you find communities around the borders engaging in smuggling as their own way of, livelihood. But that this traditional ruler not only fights smuggling, he's also in the forefront advocacy, explaining to his community why smuggling is hurting the entire nation. Number 7 is international collaboration. Communication facilitates global collaboration on sustainability initiatives. So people in Nigeria can see what is happening in Kenya. Kenya can benchmark themselves against what's happening in Egypt. Egypt can benchmark themselves against what is happening in South Africa. Number 8 is behavioral change. Communication campaigns have contributed positively to behavioral changes, such as the adoption of more eco-friendly lifestyles, waste reduction, and responsible consumption. And I can tell you, go on and on. In Nigeria, we have what we call flaring, where the oil companies that are exploring and producing carbon-based products flare the gas, and which hurts the environment. Number 9 is youth engagement. Communication has successfully engaged the youth in environmental activism. So the same youth that hitherto were in the forefront of destroying the environment because they didn't know any better, they have now become the vanguard and the protectors of the environment. And this is all through communication. Now, we will also talk about palpable challenges as highlighted above. Despite those palpable challenges, communication remains a dynamic force in advancing the sustainability agenda in Africa and, of course, globally. But looking ahead as public relations professionals, we must ensure we drive the sustainability agenda through promoting, 1, inclusiveness and diverse narratives. We must champion more inclusive and diverse narratives, ensuring that the voices of marginalized communities, indigenous groups are also heard. And we must foster a more comprehensive understanding of sustainability issues. Number 2, we must explore more innovative digital platforms. The continued evolution of digital platforms offers us opportunities for involving more communication strategies. Number 3, data visualization and impact. We must use more of data to drive data visualization so that the impact can be more effective. Number 4, behavioral science and integration. We must integrate insights from behavioral science into communication strategies so they can enhance the effectiveness of our campaigns. Number 5, artificial intelligence for personalization. AI can be employed to personalize communication, delivering messages tailored to individual preferences and behavior. And number 6, community-driven communication campaigns. We must empower local communities to lead community campaigns in Africa that can be transformative, such as grassroots initiatives supported by these strategies that can have significant impact on practices in terms of sustainability. Number 7, cross-sector collaboration. Number 8 is storytelling for advocacy. Africa is known as a continent of storytellers. Take it from Egypt to South Africa to Nigeria, all the way to Senegal. The traditional African setting is that in villages, the elders will gather at night under the moonlight, under the stars, and they will tell us stories. So we are the master storytellers. We must engage it for advocacy in Nigeria, in Africa, I beg your pardon, for sustainability. We must have real-time engagement. communication through social medias and beg your pardon, and other platforms that agree or allow for audiences participation. We must leverage to respond emerging social sustainability issues, address fears, address concerns, and keep the public informed in a timely manner. Education and capacity building must continue through communication. The advantages of education plays is very vital. We must share. Then, of course, there will always be crisis. So crisis communication for resilience. We must be proactive in our crisis communication as public relations practitioners so that we can enhance resilience in the face of environmental changes. And number 12, interactive public consultations. There must be constant town hall meetings. There must be interactions so that we can sell the importance of sustainability and through through communication. Above all, we must, through sustainability communication strategy, which is mandating, we must show the desired benefits. Like any other strategy, it has to start with data, understanding of the audience and the stakeholders. It is imperative as public relations practitioners that we map out the innovations with messages that resonate, coupled with the right mix of communication channels. Transparency is key, and I must not forget that. It is the currency of trust that communicators must openly use. Let me end by reaffirming that communication is the heartbeat of Africa's sustainability agenda, as it is globally, echoing the rhythm of change, inspiring collaboration, and heralding a future where every voice contributes to the symphony of a thriving and resilient continent. As we say at the African Public Relations Association, One Africa. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Yomi. And I hear you saying collaboration, inclusion, grassroots interaction, transparency, and trust. We are going to ask the audience to obviously ask questions and put them in the chat room. So maybe let me just give a couple of minutes if there's anyone who'd like to make a comment or ask Yomi a question. It would be your time. I don't see any comments in the room. If you would like to ask them later, Yomi will be online to be able to answer all your questions. But great delivery, Yomi.
A point of correction. I have a flight to catch. I got to be there at least 1.5 hours before. So what I'm going to do is that I will switch from my laptop to my phone while I'm in transit. If I can engage while I'm in, I will do it. Otherwise, I will answer through chats and so on. So I'm going to please crave your indulgence to excuse me so that I don't miss my flight and end up walking from Abuja to Lagos, which is about 900 kilometers.
No, thank you so much for that. You had said One Africa and connection, but I see we already have a question in the chat.
Okay, I can answer it before I go, if it's possible.
I'm just trying to read your question, Viv. Do you want to maybe verbalize it as my laptop is giving me challenges here quickly?
How do we factor behavioral science into our strategies? Please share some practical things with us. I don't know who that question is from.
It comes from, thank you.
Okay.
It comes from Viv.
From, sorry?
Viv, V-I-V.
Okay, Viv, okay. Viv. All right. Let me give you an example. There are harmful practices that that we earn maybe through culture and so on, that we are changing as time goes along. I'm trying to bring one or two of them. One, the pre-colonial times, it was thought of that in Africa, well, in a part of Nigeria, that twins were evil. So when twins were born, they were dumped in the forest. Now, communication played a part in correcting this. And that's in the extreme. But there are other issues. Take, for instance, let me use this one. Women's rights, child abuse, the environment, in terms of practices that impact on the environment, burning the forest, for instance. I gave a typical example of what I called bushmeat in Nigeria, where a lot of animals are becoming extinct because the hunters or the people are hunting them and they're killing them. So in terms of conservation, where you now know that, guess what? Yes, it may give you some temporary advantage or gain, but ultimately it spoils, it impacts on the environment. And then in Nigeria, for instance, we have desertification. Okay, I have a very good example. Desertification. So to the northern part of Nigeria, we have the Sahara Desert, and the desert has been encroaching. So you find more and more part of it coming in to, I believe, that Sokoto in the farthest part, the northern part of the country. So how are we combating this? Through planting of trees to stop the desertification. So there's been a lot of campaign in that area, whereby that the only way we can stop desertification is through tree planting. On the other hand, before then, the trees that were even there were being cut down for things like firewood, for those who would not take to or adapt to using gas or electricity or whatever form of cooking. So a lot of trees were being chopped down simply for firewood. Now, there had to be an education, a campaign that has been going on for decades, saying that the only way that desertification can be fought is through tree planting. Number two, only until recently there was a glitch, because we had zero smallpox, polio, also in Nigeria, polio and smallpox, and supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, were able to extensively fight the issue of polio. I believe polio, it was polio. And then another organization took on the issue of smallpox. A few years ago, we had a glitch. Polio was discovered, maybe an isolated case. Otherwise, we would have been able to boast that for the past 7 to 10 years, polio had been completely eradicated from Nigeria. And all of this came through communication, because what did they need? Immunization. Immunization was the key. But the culture was saying, there was a rumor going around that the children being immunized was so that they could become infertile. That it was a way of controlling the population. And so there's a campaign that went out, and then many people, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, were able to bring out their children for immunization, which severely curbed the incidences of smallpox and polio. The same thing with issues like tuberculosis. Then there's another one, which is called VVF. This, I can't pronounce it. VVF, you can look it up. What it means is that female young children were being circumcised, whereby part of their genitals were being mutilated, because they felt that it promoted promiscuity amongst the girls. So in order to reduce promiscuity amongst the girls, when they were born, their labia, I think it's called, a part of the vagina or private part was being sliced off. And many times it caused a lot of pain. And later in life, these ladies or these girls or this, when they grew into women, were unable to enjoy what they naturally should have been enjoying, sex. It was painful and they couldn't really enjoy it. So there was a massive campaign that was completely wrong. And we're able to show through numbers that there was hardly any difference between girls who are circumcised and those who are not circumcised. That in terms of promiscuity, it came from your mind. So there are many campaigns that communication has been able to help. Lately, also inclusiveness, bringing to the forefront the role that women play in the economy. And they are not chattels to be sold. The girls should not be married off at younger ages. They should be married off when they are adults and they can make those decisions. Otherwise, in certain parts of the country or the continent, girls were being married off at 13 and 14 and 15. And that's apparently, if I'm wrong, that's where DVF comes in. Because when they engaged in sex before a part of their organs had been formulated, it punctured it, and then they had things, there's a medical term for it. But I think the 3 or 4 examples are practical ones of how communication has been able to combat cultural beliefs, which has helped Africa to move forward in its sustainability.
Thank you so much, Yomi. I think we've got a lot of questions. So what I'm going to ask is that perhaps we take them, and Yomi, as you travel, you can answer those questions also in the interest of time. So
how much time do I have? Do I still have any more time? I can take 5 minutes more.
You don't have any more time. And
okay, all right.
But I'd really appeal for you to respond on the text, but we are going to conglomerate these questions and make sure when we send back the report, all the questions are answered. So Yomi, thank you so much. As always, your passion shows, and we just pray that you continue to keep the communication agenda in Africa alive. And so thank you for that. As we transition from the West, we now to the East, it is my pleasure to call upon our colleague, Peter Muthi. He is the chair of the African Regional Council for Global Alliance for PR and Communication Management, the former president of APRA, and the CEO of Peterson Integrated Communication. So handing over and welcoming you, Peter, over to you. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to see many of my colleagues that I haven't seen for a while. Maxime, you're looking good, man. I liked your song. And, I am a bass guitarist, so I would like to add more flavor onto it if you can send it to me. My name is Peter Muthi. That is the way we pronounce it, the African way. Based here in Nairobi, but I'm talking to you from Mombasa. Mombasa is our coastal city here in Kenya. Apparently, I'm involved in an event that is starting in an hour's time. So I will be able to be with you for the next probably 45 minutes, and you allow me to get into that event. And again, it's nice to have seen Yomi. Yomi worked with me for the longest. And up to now, we work together in Africa Public Relations Association. He was my Secretary General when I was the president. And I will actually, in my presentation, show you a couple of things that we did at the continent level to leverage communication in sustainable development. I do have a presentation, so if you allow me to share my screen. Yeah, there we are. Very good.
Thank you, we can see it.
You can see it. So the title of my presentation is The Place of Communication in the Sustainability Equation for Africa. I want to demonstrate where communication is as far as enhancing sustainable development in the continent is concerned. You know, I would like to start by articulating the interface between communication and sustainability. How do we connect these two? And let me start by saying that communication isn't only what we say. It is also what we do and what we don't do. And therefore, it includes silence, action, and inaction. Therefore, how are we perceived then if we are not fully involved or seen to be present in the sustainability equation? As communication professionals, if we are absent or seen to be not doing enough in promoting sustainability, and I'm using sustainability interchangeably with ESG, environment, social, and governance, because those three pillars comprise sustainability. So if we are absent, there are then a couple of interpretations that can be done about us. One, either we are ignorant about it, or we don't care about it. Either we are indifferent or we are just incompetent. And therefore, as communications people, we must be well immersed into the sustainability agenda through effective communication so that we don't fall within any of these four ways of being perceived if we are not involved. So, just to buttress my presentation, what comprises sustainability? The three pillars of environment, social, and economic issues and concerns. That is actually what sustainability is. And businesses all over the globe, whether profit making, whether multinationals, whether micro or macro institutions, they are deeply intertwined with environmental, social, and governance issues. There is no organization that is not affected or does not affect the environment or doesn't have social and governance issues. So we cannot be absent on matters of sustainability. And by the way, currently, sustainability is getting the highest attention at the global level. In the next couple of days, we are going to have the Conference of Parties meeting, what we call COP, and this time it's COP28. It will be in UAE, Dubai, and the largest conglomeration, the largest assembly of the global leaders will meet here in the next 1 week. And if you want to know how the globe is placing premium on a particular issue, look at how the world is responding to that issue. So environmental concerns, sustainability concerns actually take the first position today globally in terms of focus. And therefore, then as communications people, we must get involved. We must be fully immersed into supporting that environmental, social, and governance issues that the globe is focusing on. Let me just delve a little on the historical aspect of communication and the continent, because I was requested to show how, over time, communication has contributed to sustainable development. And it is true that historically, communication has been present in the development agenda of the African continent. As way back as 1975, and I think a couple of us probably may not have been born by then, or if we were born, we were very young, 1975, the Federation of African Public Relations Association was born in Nairobi. And the goal of the Federation was communicating positive Africa. And later, that association transformed itself into the current APRA as we know it. And I can confirm that since 2001, in Cairo, Egypt. APRA has consistently held continental conferences to discuss and contribute towards development in Africa. And it is in a couple of those conferences that I met Maxim there, first time in Calabar, Nigeria, and second time in Gaborone, in Botswana. And we stayed in some hotel called Room 52, actually, when I was checking in at the airport. And I said I was going to Room 52. They said, what do you mean? Which I said, it's a hotel by that name. And, you know, as late as May this year, we sustained that continental discussion, you know, assembling together in Lusaka to, again, contribute towards the continental communication efforts that sustain development in the continent. Next year, we will be in Abidjan, and we will be holding the 35th annual conference, 35 of those, with a conference that we are theming One Africa, One Voice, Bridging the Communication Divide. So we have been there, we have been present. I want to show you evidence. This is Mauritius 2014. And in that image is the deputy chairman of the African Union, Dr. Erastus Mwenja, seated with us for 3 good days discussing development in Africa and how communication can support the development efforts. So we have made inroads in the continent. APRA has been able to engage with the top leadership of the African Union, bringing discussions on how to enhance communication in the continent, and specifically to support Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, is the blueprint for the continent that is actually driving towards inclusive and sustainable development in Africa. And that is a continent-wide effort. And APRA is pursuing more and meaningful engagement at that level so that we can contribute significantly to the development agenda. So we have been present, we have been there, we have made inroads, we are continuing to sustain that effort. But let me now come down to the practice itself, and give you 4 points that I think are critical as entry points for us as communication specialists in contributing to sustainable development. Where do we plug in? The first point for plugging as communications people is to infuse sustainability into our respective communication strategies, ensuring that our communication strategies are fine-tuned with very well articulated sustainability messages and intervention. And let me tell you, if every organization in their communication strategy has, brought in sustainability issues and is addressing those, we are going to have an equivalent of a multi-billion-dollar campaign that is done just using our usual budgets of our organizations. So every one of us, every strategic communication professional who is leading a communication strategy needs to infuse sustainability, environment, social, and governance issues in their strategy. That is one of the best ways to plug in. Number 2 is, of course, encouraging our organizations to embrace standards. There are globally acceptable standards, and I just want to mention one here, ISO 14001. And these are globally agreed standards that set requirements for environmental management systems. There are others in the ISO family and other families. And therefore, these standards help our organizations to do things better. If it is environmental standards, they help our organizations to efficiently use resources and reduce wastage. And there is a tangible benefit, financial benefit, in the sense that they make our companies, our organizations competitive and build trust of stakeholders And trust is a currency that we sell as communication people. Number three, entry three, is of course through capacity building, training and coaching senior leaders in government, in private organization, non-profits on responsible leadership communication that embraces sustainability. Peterson has a program for training leaders, CEOs, board members, and that level of leaders. And the first topic that we look through is actually sustainable and responsible leadership communication. And that we have seen do fantastic to the program, and a lot of alumni do make that recommendation that, you know, this is one of the key lessons we learned. Point number 4, and I'm now coming to my conclusion, is to rally together as communications people to place leadership communication at the highest global level by how that is addressing responsible communication. And you know, we have worked together globally, everybody else is involved, to have this proposal for a sustainable development goal number 18 submitted to the UN. And that goal is called responsible communication. This new goal is an open and public call to use responsible communication as a way to boost the full 2030 agenda and all sustainable development initiatives. And I would like to read how that goal defines responsible and sustainable communication. 10 points. 1, open dialogue about global challenges such as climate change, poverty reduction, and democracy. 2, consider dialogue as the most powerful weapon, not missiles, not bombs. 3, allow freedom of opinion and press. 4, ethical approach to organizational and institutional communication based on facts. 5, fight against fake news and any kind of propaganda. 6, educate individuals to use their communication power, especially through social media. 7, public private support for rigorous journalism, deep level, and equality of all genders. 9, empathy to
I'm on it.
anger, poverty. Sorry?
Yeah,
9, empathy to those who suffer from anger, poverty, war, forced migration, and discrimination. And 10 is positive and inclusive language. That is how we are describing responsible communication. So we do have our place as communications professionals to contribute meaningfully to sustainable development, both at the company level, at the country level, at the continental level, and at the global level. And we have various avenues to plug in and make sure that we are as effective as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I do see that you've answered the questions of the people in the room. So I'm going to move now to the south to call upon our doyen of communication in South Africa and possibly in Southern Africa, Charmaine Russell, who's the Managing Director of Russell & Associates. Peter, you can stay online, but I think your questions have been answered, and we do wish you well with your next event. Over to you, Charmaine.
Thanks, Tubbs. Thanks for the introduction, and to the WCA CFA, for hosting the event, and Max for reminding us that we really do cool things. I've so enjoyed the thoughtful and thought-provoking thinking from Paul and Yomi and Peter, and I especially love the idea of SDG 18. Chabasile, you posed some interesting questions for us keynote speakers. And in trying to get to grip with these, I really went back to basics. And as with any other communications professional, I started off trying to understand, what am I trying to solve for? Now, 15 minutes is an incredibly short time for someone like me who just loves to talk about my two abiding passions, sustainability and communications. So I thought I would try and narrow it down to just 4 questions. And that is Africa's sustainability agenda unique? What or who are game changers? What is the role of communications? And what is the role of business? And in addressing some of these questions, I'm really going to ask our lovely audience to join in the discussion and work through these questions with me in the chat. So please keep your comments going in the chat. So first up, is Africa's sustainability agenda unique? Again, please answer this question with me in the chat. My considered answer on this one is yes and no, which of course is both good and bad. First, we are absolutely affected by global impacts and trends in sustainability and in sustainability challenges, and also in thinking. We only have to look at climate change as the most obvious example, and Yomi and Paul spoke about this specifically. Africa will be more impacted by climate change than most other parts of the world, although it contributes the least to it. And that's because we're not equipped. Our continent has fewer resources to support adaptive capacity, and many markets rely on rain-fed agriculture. In September this year, the World Meteorological Society confirmed that Africa has this high exposure and is fragile and low adaptive capacity, and that we will actually experience climate change more severely. But what we know is that climate change is not something in isolation. All of these things are connected, and people's health, peace, prosperity, infrastructure, and all the other economic issues across many sectors in Africa will be exposed to significant risks associated with climate change. So yes, our agenda is a little bit different. And let's think of other issues, for instance, that is not necessarily the same from a sustainability agenda in, say, developed nations. Food security, access to water, gender inequality, lack of access to education, lack of healthcare and resilience, high levels of crime and corruption, very often underpinned by poor governance, poor infrastructure, and a lack of economic activity. This sounds like doom and gloom, and that's not where I'm at all. So my second question, and I'm going to ask the colleagues online as well, give me some answers in the chat here. Who or what is a game changer? In his book, Practically Radical, author Bill Taylor quotes Albert Einstein as saying, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. I'm not sure if Einstein actually said this, but there is another quote that has often been misattributed to him, and that is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. That makes absolute sense, no matter who said it. But if we know this, why are we so intent on applying the same solutions or approaches developed elsewhere to our uniquely African problems? And our colleagues on the line earlier said this as well. We need context-specific solutions. That doesn't mean that our solutions are not or should not be world-class. In fact, they must be, but they also need to be context-aware. Bill Taylor's quote, which I have on screen, resonates really, really strongly with me, especially as we live in the age of disruption. And what he's basically saying is that we need to do things differently. we need to, in this kind of era of AI, of hyper competition, of dislocation, we need to stand out from the crowd. And that is the role of communications. In a 2-year study of 25 organizations, Bill took a close look at at companies that were able to achieve amazing results in terms of change and in what they were doing and how they were doing it, and despite very trying conditions. And he came up with 4 things. The first is that what you see shapes how you change. So what we've got to do as communicators is stop looking at things in the same way. If it is a challenge, admit it, then move on and try and find the opportunity within that challenge. Second, he says where you look shapes what you see. For us, that means looking beyond our sectors, beyond our countries. And this is why a forum like this is so amazing, because we can learn from elsewhere in Africa. An example for me here in South Africa is one of our clients was struggling to engage with their employees, through traditional media. And by pausing and thinking about it, we took inspiration from how unions were doing this through social media, through WhatsApp. Thinking differently is what we need to do. Third, there's nothing wrong with your organization that can't be fixed by what's right with your organization. We have so much good in what we do as a continent and in our businesses and in what our businesses are doing. We need to build on that good. That's always a good strategy. And lastly, success is not just about thinking differently from the competition, but it's also about caring more. And I know that in Africa, we have great hearts and we care greatly. A little bit later, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some companies that I think have done just interesting things in terms of game changing. Let me just go back to those questions of mine again. So what is the role of communications? Well, I would argue that globally, but particularly in Africa, our role is not only to impart truth, knowledge, and be a bit of a persuader, but also to be a change manager. For those students of change management, you'll recognize some of Kota's step change model here. It starts with purpose and vision. You need to know why you exist. We need to know why we exist. And for most enlightened companies, that means going beyond the narrow framework of shareholder interest to embrace stakeholder capitalism. And then we need to paint that vision and share it. We need to capture people's imaginations and show people what possibilities are. Speakers have spoken about this already. In Africa, more than anywhere, we understand the power of storytelling. A critical step is finding and highlighting our heroes or ambassadors, because communication is about people, not things. We must celebrate our wins, big and small, to show what is possible. My South African colleagues would know the euphoria around the Rugby World Cup and what that meant to us as a nation. And finally, we must chart a way forward. Yes, circumstances might change, but we all need to know where we're going to and what state we hope to achieve. This is a deceptively simplistic formula that underpins any sound communication strategy. So my last question was, is there a role for business? And again, tell me in the chat what you think. Is there a role for business in sustainability? Is there a conflict of interest? I probably come at it with a bias because I come from the private sector background. But my answer is overwhelmingly yes. And I would say it for 3 reasons. Speakers have spoken about trust. It is a matter of trust. And I'm sure you're aware that trust in business over governments, over media, and even other parts of civil society is actually at a high, especially here in Africa. And trust is the foundation of change and credibility. Secondly, we know that doing good is good for business. I mean, that's almost a no-brainer anymore. Third, business has the wherewithal and skills to effect change at a large scale. Just look at the renewable energy sector in Southern Africa, for instance. So I wanted to share just a couple of examples because people always ask me, you talk about these theoretical constructs. Show me how it works. Show me how it happens. So let's talk about a couple of examples where companies really have embraced sustainability and use communications to do so and have furthered both business interests and the interests of people and the environment. Thinking firstly, and many of you would perhaps be aware of this, is AngloGold Ashanti's anti-malarial program in West Africa. This initiative originated at Obuasi mine in Ghana in 2006 and was really aimed at delivering a kind of cost-effective, efficient solution for containing malaria. Malaria, as we know, has an enormous toll on communities, especially the young and the vulnerable. But it wasn't just a social issue, it was a business one. High levels of absenteeism and massive impact on productivity. The project created an entity that systematically sprays thousands of households every year. And just 2 years after implementation, the project saw a 75% decrease in malaria cases. Today, it's an independent, non-profit organization that has the ability to get external funding. And what role did communication have? A really important one right from the beginning. Firstly, to gain acceptance for this novel initiative. Second, to spread information about what was being done and to create almost a welcoming framework for the project. And the third, in trying to garner funding. It was only able to reach funding, new funding, by being able to demonstrate what it had been done. So communication was vital, part of that process. A second example, and someone on the call earlier was asking a question about behavioral economics, and there's a very solid foundation here in terms of behavioral economics. My example here is the Minerals Council South Africa, the mining industry again in Southern Africa, who had a very agile response to COVID-19 and vaccination. This was not only in the interests of employees, communities, the country as a whole, but it was actually a great deal of business self-interest at the same time. And it saw one of the most successful public-private partnerships that our country has experienced. It just went to show that business and societal interests really, really could go hand in hand to make things better. The mining industry was one of the first industries that was able to restart after its initial lockdown, and communication played a vital role here, not only ensuring that employees and their families were well equipped with appropriate information and training, but that this was very visible to others, hence the justification for the restart. And this was followed really rapidly by massive communications initiatives that supported the industry's vaccination program. By the end of the pandemic, almost 80% of mining employees had been vaccinated, while the national average was half that. Accessibility and availability of vaccines was crucial, of course, but communication played the most critical role in overcoming vaccine hesitancy. And this was an initiative that was done collaboratively. We've heard speakers speak about this before. Business, government, other role players such as unions and companies, all working together using behavioral economics principles to make sure that this life-saving and livelihood-saving initiative was successful. What was so critical in this campaign was that the industry saw employees as an integral part of their family unit and communities, and that this initiative transcended boundaries between work and home and even beyond. Employees are employees for 8 hours a day, not 24 hours a day. Another game changer here for me which I think is an amazing example, is the Marikana Renewal Initiative. Many people in the audience would remember that the tragic circumstances around Marikana, with 34 mine workers were gunned down by police and about 10 others had been killed in circumstances during that week. Sibanye Stillwater took on the mantle of Marikana when it purchased those operations. And rather than saying it wasn't our problem or sweeping it under the carpet, it took an active decision to honor the past, engage with all stakeholders, and create a vision for the future. This approach has not been without its troubles, but I'm very sure that several years later, the process has been one that has been transformative. And yes, it's absolutely been about the work of the teams on the ground, but communication and engagement has played an enormous role in bringing people together, in healing and reconciling. Another one, which is an example very close, very recent, and that is a company called Goldfields, which has operations in 5 countries around the world, including in Ghana and South Africa. Many of you will know that mining is traditionally a very male-dominated environment and a very hierarchical one as well. The company commissioned an independent research report that found terribly that 50% of employees within the company had faced harmful behavior at work over the past 5 years, and that 1/4 of women had experienced sexual harassment. What did they do? They didn't hide it. They used communication to engage with employees, with communities, to talk about a paradigm shift. Violence, bullying, and racism is not something that happens only at work. It's endemic in society, and to address this, it needs to be dealt with at all levels. So the first step in this process was to acknowledge its existence, starting with
My
recognizing
apologies,
harm.
Charmaine.
Yes.
Apologies. If I can just ask you to wrap up. Apologies for that.
To
And the
1 minute.
indulgence,
I'm right at the
please.
end.
Thank you.
And so to create a paradigm shift, they offered an apology and demonstrated a new way forward. So my conclusion in this brief presentation, which I'm hoping was only 15 minutes, is that communications is and can be a game changer. And we as communications professionals have a responsibility and opportunity to be the change that we want to be. Thanks, Tavisile. And
Charmaine is always very insightful, and I think people are engaging, and please continue to engage, and we'll be sharing that presentation. On that note, we swiftly move to our first panel. Lebo will be handling that, just to introduce the CEO of PR PowerWorks. Again, even with this panel, they will be giving you their insights, and any other questions, please put them on the call. They will be responded to via email. Thank you, Lebo. Lebo?
There we go. Sorry about that. Charmaine, that was such a good presentation. I wish we could engage further on it. And it ties pretty much into what we want to talk about in this panel, and also to what Paul said in his opening address, when he mentioned that we no longer have, as communicators, we no longer have the luxury of communicating a message and hoping that it lands. And this frames our conversation on the vital role of communication in fostering social inclusion and also ensuring a just transition in Africa. And I've got 4 esteemed panelists that are going to join me in conversation as we discuss this. I've got Dr. Clarissa Muir, lecturer and researcher in the Department of Strategic Communication at the University of Johannesburg. Clarissa, are you there?
I am. Hello, Lebo, and hi, ladies and gents. Hope you're well.
Thanks for that. I've got Dr. Pauline Kuranchi. She's lecturer in PR, advertising, and marketing at the Ghana Institute of Journalism and also a visiting lecturer at the University of Westminster. Welcome, Paulina.
Thank you, Lebo.
I've got Stella Kikutanganga, who is a strategic communications leader, crisis management expert, and a brand specialist with dreams in aviation industry, something that we have in common, and a heart for social impact. Welcome, Stella.
Thank you very much, Lebo, and good afternoon, everyone.
And then I've got Dr. Faith Rapuleng Tuelo, who is the Director of Public Affairs in the Office of the Vice Chancellor in the University of Botswana. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you, Lebu, and good afternoon, everyone.
Great stuff. Let's jump into it. I think we've got a very diverse panel that give diverse perspectives on how communication can be a powerful tool in activism, in grassroots engagement, in sustainability, and in shaping narratives if we are going to be the drivers of how sustainability projects itself in the communities in which we work, in which our clients work, in which the corporates that we work for present themselves in communities. And in our current environment, we confront a very crucial effective communications challenge, and it is how do we effectively convey currency and nuances of sustainable development and the just transition within the diversity of what African communities look like. And in light of this, I'm going to start with you, Clarissa, and ask that from a academic perspective, how can communication serve as a vehicle for social activism and participation in the development agenda? Can you share some of your insights on the effective stakeholder engagement and public information strategies that you think are effective?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lebo, and thanks for the opportunity. What was interesting is that you say it from a theoretical perspective, because I think from the get-go, we need to realize that one cannot isolate theory from praxis, because the two as isolated components mean absolutely nothing on their own. And the support of one another is where the golden nugget lies. So I want to answer that with I want to present you with a model which I think can work when we look at the African context, and that is we need to remember that communication is only the vehicle, and for us to make sense and meaning for our stakeholders is what is key. So it's not about just the communication. And the model that I want to leave you with that you can think about is what I call a 4C model. First of all, we need to remember that the African context is extremely complex. Complexity, and then also bringing in sustainability, which in itself is one of the most complex concepts which we have to deal with, not just in business, but in our real lives. So what happens with complexity is you mentioned theory. We have people like Paul Sillier, who's done a lot of research on complexity and says to us, we cannot understand complex systems without looking at the non-linear relationships, the systemic interactions that happen in that system, the boundarylessness of that system, etc. So that complexity, bringing in sustainability, which has over 300 definitions, just leaves us to say, what now? And the second C is context. The African context is amazing. Our societies, we cannot take an international copy and paste into an African context. It's like putting a Hyundai i10 spare wheel on a BMW 4x4. It will not work. The contextualization is key. And there specifically, we're presenting, I'm sitting in load shedding. You are probably sitting in load shedding as well. We're dealing with national elections coming up. We're dealing with GBV prevalence. What do we do then? Is my question. And I want to answer your question by saying, that takes me to the third C of the model, which I think we should adopt, and that is realize that it is not just a complex system, which is context specific, but we need commitment. We need national plans. We need buy-ins from government. And I cannot support Charmaine Russell's argument more by saying collaboration with government, partnerships. So when I talk about commitment, I want to leave you with the idea of a three-leveled approach. First of all, government needs to push a sustainability national plan, which they do, but I think it needs to really be a very big agenda in the country. And it obviously requires political will. With that, business it's a non-negotiable that they have to be consulted. And as Charmaine mentioned, it's because their purpose needs to revolve around sustainability as well. And then the third element with commitment is obviously the individual. And we see it in our South African context with all our proudly South African projects and how well it works. If we can bring government, business, and individuals and their commitment together, we obviously then can focus on the fourth C of what I think is important, and that is communication. Remember, communication is only the vehicle. What do I want to leave you here with? Curatorship. We are responsible as communicators to create meaning for our stakeholders. So we need to curate this message so that they do hop on board, that they actually do emphasize the slowing down of extraction of our resources. We do emphasize reduction in corruption in Africa. The focus on governance is absolutely crucial. And then there is life after the SDG 2030. Many businesses and many individuals are saying, oh, but the framework didn't work. The framework might not have worked, is your perception. But now as communicators, we realize that as government, it's a non-negotiable. As business, it's a non-negotiable. So now I need to then realize that I need to take a new approach. Okay. So I don't know if you want me to talk about the new approach, but there specifically, I think moving away from, absolutely. Yeah. Moving away from corporate sustainable investment and responsibility to really realizing that your sustainability strategy, regardless of whether you're a government or a business or even a personal brand, your stakeholder sustainability is key to any strategy. Whether you have a national strategy for your country, a business strategy, or building your personal brand. So there I want to say to you, what key insights do we then take when we look at our stakeholder engagement, and we need to engage with consumers and with our society, with our citizens as government, or actually with other employees, when we look at how we are a sustainable people and how we're leaving a sustainable world for the generations after us to flourish. And that is, I want to refer to purpose and emphasize the approach of Simon Sinek. Because at the end of the day, all of us have probably heard it, we've watched the video, we understand it, and we know it works in our field. But at the end of the day, if you do not know the why, the how and the what will not happen. So then I want to place emphasis on, if you cannot clearly crystallize that why in an African context for your existence as an entity, then you need to go back to the drawing board, because then your stakeholders are not going to get that message. Remember your what, which is your third component. So after your why, you obviously have the how and the what. The what is where we come in. That is where the communicators come in, and where we explain how we can take this forward. So in conclusion, Lebo, to answer your question, we are in a complex system in the African context, but complex systems self-organize. We all, many of us are here without electricity, yet we're online, and load shedding, everything is still working. Why? Because we've self-organized and we made sure that we have those devices to take us through. Sure. Secondly, Ubuntu at the core of who we are. We are because I form part of that community, but more importantly, the we and the I needs an equal contribution, and you need to take the accountability for your contribution. And then lastly, let's focus on SDG. Life after SDG. Let's get the activism and the participation going in the various realms of our societies. And let's make sure that we do create a new definition of sustainability, which is not the Brundtland Commission sustainability. But let's make sure that we create that reality, that we know what is required for next generations to flourish. I thank you for your time. And you're more than welcome to ask questions later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Level, panelists, please be brief. We've run out of time. I know as Africans, we are very passionate. Apologies for that interruption. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I mean, Clarissa speaks about complexity, about context, about commitment, and she's speaking about it at two levels. She's speaking about it at government level, but it's also communicating to the people on the ground. And when you, Dr. Kurenji, I'm posing this to you, considering the communications challenge that we face at grassroots level, how can we ensure that all of these things that we are talking about and the inclusivity and the just advancement that we are talking about reaches the communities where the real impact happens? Is it a matter of communicating through new technologies? Is it about expanding more on digital communications, even though that there are challenges in digital communication and digital reach anyway in some parts of the continent?
Thank you, Lebo, and hello, everyone. It's been fantastic so far. I think that these complexities occur again because a lot of times especially communicating with the grassroots, we are communicating from outside in rather than from inside out. And once you do that, you lose the context. And that context is very important. I think every speaker this afternoon has talked about context. And so for me, it's important that we communicate with people at the grassroots in ways such that they see themselves in the mirror. So our communication should reflect them. Yes, we should be aspirational in some of the communication that we do, but they also need to see themselves in the communication. And so, for example, when it comes to environmental sustainability in Ghana, as I am sure is in a lot of other African communities, we have things like sacred groves in which nobody had to go. And so when you are communicating about some of these things, you let the people know that they live sustainability or they live sustainably. They may not think of it in those terms, but you use things that they are familiar with to communicate to them. We have, again, as an example in environmental sustainability, taboo fishing days in Ghana. These are ways that our people have lived sustainably and protects them. So when we are communicating, we shouldn't bring communication that comes from outside, but are there ways that they can see themselves in the mirror? Are there ways that we can project what they have already lived? So we don't throw away their lived experience, their knowledge systems, and things like that. And I think when we do that, people are able to recognize themselves in the communication and look for ways that work for them to live sustainably. You again asked about whether digital technology can help us to communicate effectively. I think it can and it does. First of all, for us as practitioners, what digital technology does for us is it puts information at our fingertips. And so we need to use it in ways that ensures that we understand where we are going to communicate. So it closes the gap between us and them, because you can go into any system based on the information provided online, for example, and know that this is how these people are. These communication activities will work, those ones won't work. So that is the benefit for us. But more than that also, it helps us reach our audiences quicker. But we need to have in mind that we live in a continent where the literacy rate on the average is about 67%. So how do we reach the other almost 30%? And think of internet connectivity. So the South Africans are, for example, talking about living in load shedding.
Yeah.
How do we find innovative ways of communicating in this digital space where access to internet is problematic, access to electricity is problematic? We need to work with digital outside of the internet, for example. So can we use USSD to communicate with them? Yes, we can. So let's try that. Can we use SMS to communicate? We try that. To personalize the conversation. Because if I receive information on my phone, that sounds a lot more personal than if I see it on, say, TV or generally on Facebook. So we need to make use of some of these digital technologies. And then finally, one of the things I'll say is, I think we have underutilized WhatsApp as a digital tool on the continent. We can use WhatsApp to do so many other things. And yes, it relies on the internet, but we can mobilize people using WhatsApp as internet connectivity improves and as mobile phone connectivity also improves. Finally, I want to say that.
Last finally.
Yes, that is the finally. Sustainability also means we project what has worked for us as a continent. And some of these things are the storytelling that we have talked about, centering people as Africans. Community is so important. Everybody has talked about Ubuntu. It's important that we project these things in our communication in ways that reflect our people and in ways that people can see themselves in our communication. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Dr. Rapuleng Tuelo, I'm going to jump to you. Dr. Kuranchi speaks about the fact that we are communicating from the inside in, not from the inside out, and that, you know, how do we communicate in such a way that people see themselves in the communications that we put out? How can Africa, and I think it's more of a narrative issue and how we bring sustainability home, right? So, Dr. Rapuleng, how can Africa shape the sustainability narrative that has always been traditionally dictated by the global north? Should we be, who should lead this communication, and what stories do we need to tell for sustainability to sound and become more inclusive, and for the transition to sound more inclusive?
Okay. In my view, I think this should be led by universities through research. In the sense that universities should run from the front, in the sense that they have to conduct researches that inform the government on what areas need to be researched on, so that they can inform policies. Botswana, just like other developing nations, have seized opportunities on sustainability, and they have gained in traction. They've heeded the clarion call, and through the research agenda, which is one of the campaigns that is ongoing from the president, office, they're preaching on issues where we need to change, or we need to change our ways of doing things, mindset change, behavioral change, so that we can continue to seize on opportunities that can change our lives. When you talk about sustainability and the just transition, we have to ensure that even the way we shape our communications, as the communications in the workplaces, we have to ensure that we package messages in the sense that we don't leave anyone out. We communicate, the government interventions that are geared towards ensuring that we cushion the citizens using the government social justice systems, the job creations, interventions, and the diversified economic opportunities that are available within the government system. And then also the climate change repercussions, and ensure that all citizens that are out there in the far-flung areas that may not know what government opportunities are available, that may cushion them economically. It is our responsibilities as the communication specialists or missionaries to ensure that messages are communicated efficiently in the language that is accessible to everyone, and ensure that at the end of the day, solutions are provided, innovative solutions. Nowadays, we are talking about the green economies, and we're talking about green solutions. These are the solutions that citizens of Botswana, just like other developed nations, they can embrace on. When we talk about this SDG 7, these days, we talk about affordable and clean energy. We should ensure that we teach them on how they can embrace these opportunities, looking at the available resources within their communities. Africa is blessed with the sun. We've got lots of sun. We should be able to teach them on how they can tap into these resources and, make money out of those, maybe ask for funding or seize opportunities on how to make living out of such, but it doesn't end there. We need to create sustainable policies, that can help our workplaces to ensure that they also, continue to leapfrog and take million steps that can help them to position themselves during this period. I think with that, I can go on and on. I think I can proudly say that the government of Botswana has really cushioned, its citizens or its people economically and socially.
Great, thank you for your insights, and they're very important, because everything that we are talking about is pretty much anchored around the SDGs. And Dr. Mira said something very that I like. She said, there is life after 2030. And I want to throw this at you, Stella, that the 2030 deadline for the SDGs is approaching. Have we effectively raised awareness, and have we provided essential information for meaningful participation in development? What would you say is missing from a development communication perspective?
Thank you for the question. I want to say that I think a lot has been done, of course, in socializing the SDGs with governments, with NGOs, and with business. But I think there's a lot more that we can do to ensure that we reach citizens at the grassroots level. For me, there are two measures of whether a message has landed in a community. The first is whether there's a word in the local dialect that is relatable and that can communicate that concept to the people in the native language. So if you just think about your own native language, is there a word for SDGs in there? We know that with the HIV, in the 80s, when there was the whole, communication and behavior change on HIV, in our local dialects, there are words for HIV and AIDS. Is there a word for the SDGs? Secondly, is whether children can articulate the message in their own simple way. I remember one time in working for one of the multinational beverage companies, just in my house, the theme song of a certain World Cup campaign, when the World Cup was coming to Africa, I could hear the children singing it, and they were not even the target of that campaign, but the message had landed. So if the children are not singing it, and if you can't say it in your local dialect, maybe we need to do some more homework. So what's missing? I think number one is something that Dr. Paulina talked about, which is connecting to the grassroots in terms of when, our communities are already doing a lot of work in terms of, trying to end poverty, zeroing hunger, promoting good health and the sorts. Can they see a line of sight between what they are doing and the SDGs? Or are these SDGs raining from the top into the community? And I think we have an opportunity to work with community leaders, religious leaders, using even religious concepts that we understand, like stewardship and the like, working with women's groups who are continuously and always connected to their communities to ensure that people see that every little thing they do is adding up to the building of the SDGs, that these are not miracles that will come from the sky and land on the ground, that everything we are doing at home, in school, at play, wherever it may be, decisions that we're making in governments, in business, are all adding up or taking away from the SDGs. The second thing I would also like us to think about is how the SDGs can go to the last mile. So I call this last mile thinking. And I will borrow from Coca-Cola because I worked there. And, Charmaine talked about, what the role of business is. One of the things that Coca-Cola has done very well is to get to the last mile. In fact, it is said that Coca-Cola is the second most famous word after okay. Now, children, like we said at the beginning, Children know about Coca-Cola. Nobody taught them this in school. It's not part of the curriculum, but they know about it. So what is this that Coca-Cola is doing right? That they're able to get their beverage and their message and their word to the farthest corner of the world, but our SDG messaging is not getting there. So I think there is something that we can borrow and make sure that we drive that urgency. Thirdly, and finally, is about simplifying and prioritizing. So I would like everybody here to imagine a planetary, because we said that there's a world after 2030, right? So let's imagine a planetary emergency that required all of humanity to escape the Earth and begin life on another continent. If we had to pick 5 SDG goals to start life elsewhere, which 5 would you pick? I think 17 goals are just too many, and I even had the addition of an 18th one, right? You can't deal with life. Governments cannot deal with all the drama they have and still deal with 17 SDG goals. I think even when you look at, religious forums, I'm a Christian, so I'll put it out there. The golden rule is 2 things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. 2 things. You have 17 goals. Which goal will you pick or drop? I think that we need, in the spirit of urgency, and if you're running out of a building, maybe you can only pick your purse and run. If we had to pick that purse, how can we classify these goals so that we have 5 goals? I was told by my sister-in-law, who's a Muslim, that the faith asks that you only have you and 4 other friends. So if you had to pick 5 goals, which 5 goals would we pick that if together we joined hands, we would make a difference and urgently usher the delivery of the SDGs? Thank you.
Amazing. I love that. We don't have a lot of time, so we do have to wrap the conversation up. But I'd like to thank everyone for the very insightful contributions. And I think hoping that the audience has also been able to pick up a lot from this conversation. But I think what's important and what Clarissa said is that there is complexity, there's context, there's commitment that we have to drive to get the messaging of sustainability into the market, into communities, and to be able to do so. And I think Africa is in the best possible position to be able to do so, because as we've said, that complex systems self-organize. And I think that as Africans, we've got the ability to do that. And I think what is left for us to do is to do exactly what you've just said, Stella, that if the children are not singing it, we haven't won yet. And I think that's the goal that we should be working towards as communicators. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Lebo.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists. So as we close, we are going to ask Halim Aboutsaif, Managing Director of International Co. He's a Senior PR Consultant at Radar and Research and Public Relations, to just come online. And Kobe here, who works at the Ghana India Kofi Annan Center for Excellence in ICT, and Janine Hills. And all that I'm going to ask them to do, because they are going to talk about leadership, is for them to then reflect on the role of leadership as we close this session, because it's quite critical to now appreciate that there's a lot we need to talk about as Africa. It is our first conversation. There will be many more. So if I can hand over to you, actually, as you do your presentation, your contribution, you also close off for us, because I think your contribution about leadership in sum totaling this conversation is critical. Over to you, Halim.
Thank you very much, Tabisilia. Thank you very much, everybody. Maxime, thank you for inviting me here. I'm really impressed. I was looking at my presentation throughout the whole session, and I had to delete a lot of things that I have to be. I'm impressed by the way we all think and the way we all share the same beliefs. I can see that everybody is talking the same language. We see the same problems. We see the same challenges, and we really agree with each other more that we need communication, and communication is key for us. So most of the speakers that spoke today really enlightened us with everything that we want to say. They are really good into that. Today I want to say that communication is like a superhero in Africa's sustainability plans. We all know that Africa is facing a lot of challenges. when it comes to communication, environment, and society. We all know this. It's like a superpower that can bring positive change, teamwork, and sustainable future in Africa. Good communication makes a big difference in sustainable development. That is what we need to keep on saying for everybody. It helps people understand the important issues affecting the environment. When we share information and talk about these things, it's like running a light bulb in everyone's head. We all get the same idea and say, hey, let's take an action. And this is exactly what we want to produce in everybody's minds. Communication is very important for leaders to be effective. Leaders should be experts in communication as we are. And that is a very important concept we need to push in them. Okay, it helps them bring people together and work towards a sustainable future. In Africa, including Egypt, leaders have recognized the significance of communication in achieving sustainability development. They understand the need to share their ideas and plans with the people and encourage dialogue and engagement. These are two important words in our environment these days. But the truth is that communicating in African, as you all said, are very difficult. We have a lot of challenges. One of the main problems is there are many different languages and cultures across the continent. There are over 2,000 different languages in Africa, which makes it really hard to communicate well between countries and nations. Furthermore, illiteracy and limited access to information, communication technologies hinder effective communication channels, particularly in rural areas, as we all say. These challenges pose significant barriers to leaders in their efforts to convey messages and rally support for sustainable initiatives. Nevertheless, amongst these challenges, there are also great opportunities. Africa has witnessed a rapid growth in mobile phone usage and internet penetration in recent years, providing leaders with new avenues to reach their population. Social media platform has emerged as a powerful tool for communication, enabling leaders to engage directly with their citizens, disseminating information and receive feedback in real time. Africa leaders who bind the power of these platforms can foster a sense of inclusivity, transparency, and participation, thus strengthening the bond between the leadership and the people. Let's take a look at Egypt, who has rich history and diverse culture that provides a strong foundation for effective communication. Egyptian leaders have used the cultural wealth to create stories and symbols that people can relate to. We created a platform for dialogue, empowering citizens, businesses, and policymakers to exchange ideas, make smart choices, and take action, showing us that communication can be a force for good on the path of sustainability. Egypt's commitment to innovation in communication technology has changed way sustainability challenges. The country has embraced digital transformation, leveraged the power of mobile connectivity, social media, and other emerging technologies to engage with diverse audience and amplify sustainability messages. Technological advances have bridged the gap between urban and rural population, facilitating inclusivity in communication and ensuring that no one is left behind in the pursuit of sustainability. I think it's a wake-up call for all of us to recognize the impact of communication and make the most out of it. We need to invest in communication infrastructure, promote media literacy, and create an environment with everyone's access to information when they can really feel engaged with everybody else. By giving the community the communication, the attention it deserves, we can unlock Africa's full potential and speed up the progress towards a sustainable future. In conclusion, Africa leaders, include those in Egypt, have recognized the importance to have an open dialogue, inclusivity, and active listening platforms. Let us strive for a future where African nations hear their leaders and leaders listen to the voices of the people, working together to build a stronger and sustainable Africa for generations to come. As member of World Communication Forum Association today, Let's keep being superheroes of communication in Africa's sustainability journey. We can work together towards a sustainable Africa. So let's join forces and make the world say, wow, Africa is amazing, which it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
One Africa.
So I'm going to give Janine and Kobe, who's struggling on the road. Janine, it is a leadership message. 1 minute, please, as we've reached our time boundary. I do apologize for that. And I do commit with Maxime, we will do a lot more of these. Just 1 minute about leadership. And Kobe, if you can come in just 1 minute about leadership so we can close the session.
No worries about that. We have
Absolutely. Thank you.
So Jenny, take your time. Don't worry.
No.
It's public relations experts and lawyers are allowed to cross the time. So don't worry about that.
No, thank you. But let's not keep on saying in conclusion.
1 minute.
We Africans, Maxine, we won't stop. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. No problem. So, first of all, I think everybody's been amazing. I think the key thing, what I'd like to add on, if I may, is I think we're entering into an era where authentic leadership as ourselves, as communicators, as reputation management leaders, as crisis leaders, we need to be those leaders that truly lead by example. And you can see it. I mean, we have leaders in Africa that really need us. And what I mean by that, everybody in this forum to be honest, with integrity, lead with distinction, be able to lead with heart so that we understand people and be heard. So the shift in communication is undoubtedly happened after COVID. I think the empathy has had to come in a lot more than ever before. So I'm saying that on this platform, we need each and every one of us to lead the leaders of Africa so that we bring Africa together as one. And what that means is that we need to make the right decisions. We need to choose the right clients. We need to guide the right clients with honest integrity. And if it's not the right client, don't spread the fake news. Don't be part of the negative narrative. Be part of the positive narrative, not because you're chasing the money, but because you're chasing the story of one Africa together and uniting this incredible continent. So I think we have to start really looking at ourselves, which a lot of us do, and where we can help our other colleagues, let's do that. But I think in some instances, a negative narrative is great because of money. And yes, sometimes we've got a negative narrative coming out from other continents, communicating in our continent. And I think that's where the corroboration is absolutely vital. So yeah, my call for honest integrity and working together is what I really believe as communicators and reputation management experts we need to be. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Janine. And I would appeal for people to engage further with Janine in her leadership can advance this agenda further. So Janine, from a South African perspective, we will be calling on you to speak to us from a South African chapter of World Communication Forum, because leadership is quite critical. Kobe, 1 minute, can leadership use technology to get us there? If you are able to connect, I know you are struggling online. If not, please do let us know if you can come on.
Yes, Debbie, thank you. And thank you to our initial speakers. It's been a fantastic conference. Regarding leadership, the brief thing now will say that as Africans, we have very strong leaders. And many a times we do refer to our leaders to bring the change. I would say that today, we're here talking about leadership. And for everyone who is online listening and attending this conference, we are the leaders. We have the opportunity to change the narrative. And many of us too in our workplace have the opportunity to groom leaders. And also in our various homes, it is about time that we use all the forms of communication that we do have to change the leadership narrative. Everything is possible in Africa. Africa is amazing with all the resources, including the human resources. For what we had wanted our predecessors to change and they've not been able to change, it's our time now. It is our time to change the narrative, walk the talk, and ensure that we get the Africa we want. Thank you, Tavi.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our program. I truly, truly do appreciate you staying on and your time. On behalf of the World Communication Forum, the African team, thank you so much. Maybe over to you, Maxime, to just say goodbye, maybe, and thank you to my side. And I'm super, super grateful that we have been able to manage this. Maxime?
I have only 3 words at the beginning, which I start with a song. And the song is called PR We Are. So I just want to say that PR we are one community of people who would like to have better business, to understand each other much better. And the World Communications Forum is one of the most important tools to get people together and to give the good stage or opportunity for us to exchange our opinions. Because in our business, the more we exchange ideas and points of view and strategies, the better we will be in the business. The most important for us is to be, especially those days with the artificial intelligence and all the new things which are coming to our life, the most important is to be ethical, transparent, and if we are ethical and transparent, then we'll be professional, that's for sure. As I said at the very beginning, each participant or registered person to participate in this forum will get 20% discount for the annual membership fee. You will receive, of the World Communications Forum Association, you will receive a follow-up email, most probably on Monday, with the details, with the special thanks, and really think we say one Africa, but in our public relations business, it's one world, basically. No matter if it's Asia, Europe, America, or Africa, we are together. And I would like to thank you very, 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 very much, to wish you a very nice and relaxing weekend, and really respect and chapeau to our leader, Thabisile Fumo, who did this great event possible. Chapeau, Thabisile.
Thank you to everyone. Please have a fantastic weekend, and let's please connect either via us or via LinkedIn, but let there be business and collaboration between Africa and the world. Thank you.